Hello and welcome to Brandtuned, Successful Brand, Successful Business, the show for entrepreneurs and brand creators where we discuss personal and business branding to give you ideas and inspiration for your own brand. I'm Shireen Smith, lawyer, entrepreneur, author, and advocate for developing purpose-based brands to change the world. Stephen Fenton's professional career spans more than 20 years advising both private and public sector organizations on marketing and brand management. He studied graphic design, and before Zeek was conceived, he ran Domain Associates, and prior to 1997 was the design director of Counterpoint. Welcome, Stephen, to Brandtuned. How are you today?
Very good. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you for having me.
Great. I hope I pronounced Zeek correctly. Is it Zeek?
You do, yes. Very well done.
Great. So when did you go into business on your own, Stephen? Tell us a bit more about your background.
So on my own is very much the 1997 year that you've already mentioned. Prior to that, as you said, I was involved with other companies doing similar things. But yes, 1997 was the moment I went out on my own, so to speak, and probably a long story actually behind that. But to put it simply, there was a lot going on with the businesses I'd previously been involved with that meant, like a lot of things in life, I kind of almost had no choice but to seek a slightly different direction. And that was the best thing I've probably ever done, actually.
Did you find it challenging in the early days at all in terms of knowing how to run a business?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'd had some experience being on the board of directors about these other businesses, but I think it's quite a different thing when, as a lot of people say, it can be a lonely experience initially, and you're finding your feet, and it's all resting on your own shoulders, as it were. But the good thing was that as a result of my previous connections, and indeed what had happened to the business I'd come from, and I don't want to dwell on that, but it meant that I had a bit of a ready-made client base. In other words, some business that was sought me out to work for them, rather than it all being about me having to do the new business development. Obviously, there was a degree of that, and I think overall, a lot of people in my situation would agree with me. That's about the hardest thing you have to do. You can take care of the finances to a certain extent. You can get support for other things, but winning client business is by far and away the hardest.
Yeah. So who is your typical client? Has it changed quite a lot since the 1997?
Yeah, it has, insofar as in recent times, the business that I know we're going to talk a bit more about later, Zeek, is now very specialist in a particular sector, which is high-end home and interiors clients. Prior to that, I was a little bit more generalist, including some within that group as well. But I had clients from areas as diverse as IT, financial services. So it was a more mixed bag previously.
And who is a typical client now? How do they present to you?
So these days we work with those that are in home and interior sector, with a few in property, and in many ways that property category is not dissimilar to the home and interiors world. So we tend to be quite specialist now, and the size and scale of those companies can vary quite considerably. One of our largest clients is globally a sort of multi-billion-pound business, when we just act for them in respect of the work they do in the UK, so a much smaller part of their operation. But then we've got businesses who might be furniture manufacturers starting out, one-man band businesses, just breaking into the world. So the size of those companies can be very different. but what they tend to be about is luxury, lovely products that are handcrafted in many cases, beautiful design pieces, and it say very much about home and interiors.
Essentially, what do you actually do for them? Are you, doing everything like brochures, etc., or do you focus on a particular type of work that you provide?
I suppose you could say we have our sweet spot, which
Hmm.
is very much about brand creation and brand development. But but clearly not every client is at that juncture or at that stage that's going to be appropriate. What we often have is the more established, long founded businesses, if you like. In some cases, can be over 100 years, uh, coming to us for the need to review and refresh their brand, or for us to undertake a bit of work to understand if there needs to be any realignment or adjustment to where they're at currently. Um, for those smaller businesses that I referred to, that are just starting out in life, then of course there is the need from a very much a blank sheet of paper to understand what they want to be, how they want to look and feel, and in many cases, and I know this is a subject close to your own heart, naming, the name generation and the trademark, and that can be very much part of it. So I think our sweet spot is getting involved in the brand creation where we can, but obviously there's a category of clients for whom much of that is already in place. So arguably one would use the term, it's more about maintenance, delivery, implementation and maintenance of an existing style guide and a set of brand rules, really.
Do they tend to have shops, or what sort of businesses are they?
We have to, I suppose, distinguish between the B2B type of work we do
Hmm.
and the B2C. We've got a fairly balanced mix, I guess, of those, with some clients obviously operating in both spaces and involving, and us having to be involved in each aspect of that. But yeah, for those that have a consumer focus, they will often have showrooms. I mean, I'm thinking of one client in particular, without going into the details of who they are, but they have kitchen products, and nationwide probably now have around 12 or so individual showrooms, where customers, obviously, where they engage with customers um, at retail level. But we do have quite a number of clients who are talking to the interior design community or the specifier market. So there wouldn't be a physical space always in those cases, or they would be a brand who manufacture and make a product where part of their job is to support their retail network. And I'm again thinking of one case in point, which is probably one of our largest clients, who, we were involved in a piece of work that helped them roll out a new project to around 100 retailers around the UK. So they don't have their own retail space, but they have product that goes in other people's shops or showrooms.
So I imagine for a large number of your clients, they're having to reinvent their businesses in the face of the current crisis.
Oh yes. I mean, it's quite major. We did a very interesting thing for one of our clients who was being very much facing the whole lockdown thing with a week to go, with us all obviously knowing that it was likely to hit. We managed to create virtual showrooms for them. It wasn't for all of their showrooms, but we set about using some technology which is not new. I mean, it's been applied very much in property marketing for many years, and this allowed us to take 3D 360-degree images. They're often called scans, but imagery that can be pulled together to allow a virtual tour. And now that particular client, off from their website and through email marketing, can say to people, "We're not open, our doors are not open, but come in and have a look around." And they can do that from the comfort of their own home. And I understand it's proving quite useful to them. So, there are things we have to think quick, don't we? I mean, unfortunately, there
Yeah.
wasn't a lot of time for us to roll that idea out to every one of our clients. It just wouldn't have been possible. But
Yeah.
for those that have it now, it's quite useful.
Yeah, I imagine as we emerge from this, there's going to be a lot of rebranding work because of some of the adjustments that businesses will make, to become more digital and such like. So what sort of pre-strategy or branding work would you ideally like a client to have done before they engage your services?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting area because whilst we want clients to be prepared and to have an understanding of where they're going in a commercial sense, as a business plan, if you like, what we
Mm.
almost don't want them to do is have too much baggage or to come to us necessarily with too many preconceived ideas. It is incredibly satisfying for us to have a much more blank sheet of paper to start with. Now, I can appreciate that's not possible in all cases. And forgive me using that term baggage. I mean, I don't mean that disrespectfully, but
Mm.
there are times when people have almost done too much work before they
Oh,
sit down.
how's that?
Well, it's because they need really to. I think the analogy one of my colleagues makes is it's a bit like going to the doctor and you need their diagnosis. You can't self-diagnose.
Mm.
You can't predetermine by reading online what your ailment or condition is. You really need to present to them what the symptoms are, and then they should be able to determine where this goes, right? And that's similar for us. It's very important for the business, as I say, to understand what its objectives are, where it's heading, but not necessarily to have made any firm decisions on what that means in branding, in terms of branding. Now, of course, it is very different if we're talking about an existing brand that has brand equity built in it and lots of history and heritage that we've got to take on board. So I don't mean throw the baby out with the bathwater in a way. But what I do think can be a problem is when clients have already forged the answer before talking to us even about the problem.
So, if, for example, they haven't thought it through, how long does your process give them to think through things like what their purpose is and, things that require quite a lot of deep thinking?
Yeah, well, we have we have a sort of system and process that we now adopt where it's appropriate to do so with clients. More often than not, a key part of that is a branding workshop.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for a larger client, that may mean getting a whole team of people around a table. We would ask them to consider who the key stakeholders in the process are. That might be senior management level people, but it might equally be those involved in product, development, and if you like, further into the organization. But what we would like to do is get people to start thinking and talking together. And we tend to facilitate those sessions, as I say, in a group scenario. It's been a bit hard at the moment. We've got a client who's talking about doing these virtually next week. It won't be as good as sitting around the table. And some of what we do within that is almost play some games with them. We have a lovely, I'm going to call it a card game. We have a set of cards that deal with brand archetypes and allow people to explore what they stand for, what the personality of their organization needs to be. And as you rightly say, things like purpose and that come out of those sessions. So yeah, we have a structure we can take them through. For smaller clients who maybe don't have the teams to engage at that level or need to do things more remotely, we have a sort of bit of homework that we can set them. We can send them a document. Again, they fill in some of the blanks. It's a sort of templated thing and they get things back to us which give us some of the answers we need. So, yeah, in terms of your question, sorry, it was about time frame.
Yeah.
That can take a matter of a couple of weeks, or for some it can take months. Not a huge number of months, but it very much depends, obviously, when everyone's available, and we wouldn't ever want to rush the process because, as you intimated, they've got to have the time and they've got to get it right. But we like to steer our clients into giving us the answers we're looking for from that process. And, often they tell us they just enjoy the process. When they come, we've had clients who have, they get the chance to take the day out from their own businesses, come to our studio, or sometimes a, hotel or a location that we arranged for them. And then they get to think outside of the normal routine, which is hugely valuable for them. It's a really good process, I think. It's that old classic thing, isn't it, of working on your business, not in it,
Sure, yes. So in these workshops, do you provide education on what a brand involves, or how does it work?
Yeah, if they need it. I mean, you'll appreciate that some of our clients are very skilled, experienced, and seasoned business people, and some of them are marketeers with a lot of knowledge already, formal training in many cases. And we don't try to teach them how to suck eggs. So they might know the process, but they may not have done it exactly in our way before. But as I say, they learn a lot from it because it's, I suppose, a bit of navel gazing. They learn about themselves and their business, and they're saying things. Sometimes they're bringing to the surface things that have always been there, but they didn't really get the chance to notice them in the past, if you know what I mean. And I think that's hugely valuable.
And who would be at those sessions for, say, a large company?
Well, it does differ from business to business. We've done them before, where for reasons known mainly to the client senior management only, that we've kept separate management and the other teams, if you like. And in other cases, we've done a sort of merge of joining them together. It comes down to whether the individuals feel what's the right term for it? Unencumbered by if they feel the glaring eyes of the board of directors on them, they may not always be as free and open with what they're prepared to say and talk about, and vice versa. Sometimes a CEO or a managing director doesn't particularly want to talk in front of the members of staff. So we have to be sensitive to that and work it out according to each company. But normally it's quite mixed. Normally they work really well when you get somebody from the sort of shop floor, a carpenter or a sort of artisan maker with the MD or marketing director. Often they're marketing people, of course, but owner managers of the smaller businesses. It's very varied. I let the clients direct us to a certain extent on who they want to be there and who they'd like to hear from. We will always advise them if we feel they're missing some important individuals. We would say, can we involve them too? And we've had, I'm thinking of one case in particular, which is also a kitchen brand, where they have by definition very creative people working for them because they're designers, design spaces and furniture things. And so they wanted really hands-on, a very hands-on process. So we got them involved in making mood boards and cutting and sticking things. And, that was very, very much a hands-on process.
We'll take a short break at this point, as I'd like to mention the brand-tuned series of webinars which support founders to think through their brand, taking IP into account at the right time, which is before you make firm decisions about what to create. Just visit brandtuned.com and the webinars are referenced right there on the homepage. Okay, back to the podcast now. Yeah, so obviously the visual is very important, although how do you then make sure that the positioning that they're going to adopt, which the visuals will reflect, is going to be valuable to their business? Do you just do one workshop, or how would you be helping them to work out a better positioning?
Yeah, well, what you're referring to then would probably take us into the realms of sometimes there are consumer or customer, again, if it's a B2B thing, it wouldn't involve consumers, but, there can be sort of focus groups or sessions involving their end customers and people from the sector, from their audience, if you like. It's not always just about an internal process. So yes, I think to answer your point, there would, for a sizable enough project, there would be more than one workshop session, and there would be a combination of things that once once we've collated all the information from those things and prepared some analysis, which normally takes the form of a kind of written report. We try and keep things as simple as possible. We don't want to weigh clients down with pages and pages and reams of background research. But what we're aiming to do is to distill from each of these elements enough to give us the brief. Because clearly, for some clients, it's difficult writing the brief. And one would argue that any creative, back to your point about visual, creative, and design, anything we produce, the final result is only as good as the brief. So what we're really trying to do here is define a better brief and a set of pointers and criteria that we can all work to. And yes, so the positioning is another aspect of that. We've got them, we've got their purpose, their personality, if you like. I think you yourself use the term often DNA. It's that brand DNA. It's understanding what that's all about. But then the external manifestation of that is what we might do visually in design to reach the right audience. And one of the things that I often think about that a number of marketeers over the years that I've talked to and highly respect have used is a very simple way of talking about this. It's we would ask the client, what do you want people to think, feel, and do? I mean, there are three things ultimately that you can distill all this down to. Whatever work we come up with, it's got to make people think the right way, feel about it the right way, and then ultimately there's some call to action. Now, in many cases, that do is to go out and buy the product or to partake of the service. So we can make it very, very simple. Ultimately, I think we do all this background work so that we can have a very clear vision, a shared vision between us and the client and what we're going to achieve.
So what is the deliverable then? What are they hoping that you will give them as an outcome from coming to you for the rebrand or whatever work you're doing with them?
Well, I suppose the initial deliverable is, as I mentioned, out of the workshop and preparatory sessions, they get a document that confirms everything we've learned, and are we all on the same page? Do we agree with this analysis of it? And then the ultimate deliverable, on the basis that we've been commissioned to come up with it, might well be the brand identity or the realigned, refreshed branding. And then how is that implemented? I mean, just yesterday from home, I was working on identity guidelines for a client who has had the work that we did for them in place for actually almost a couple of years now. At no point did they ever commission us to complete the identity guideline. That's fine. This is almost not retrospective. This is a thing we've added into the mix. But often we do that at the point of delivery, so that you've got a kind of rule book for how this branding is going to be rolled out. But I think the deliverables, again, they vary massively. A client may say to us, I'm looking to engage you for a year, 6 months to a year or longer, in which case month by month we might be delivering something new or something additional to the plan.
Okay, so if I'm understanding it correctly, then you're effectively helping them with the brand strategy, and the actual identity work is quite separate. They don't necessarily need to go on to have it done by you, or
no, they don't. No, they don't have to have it done. It is our aim to deliver on all of that. Sorry, I may have confused that. If and where possible, budget permitting, and yes, we would want to work on all of that. And in fact, what we enjoy the most, I said earlier, was our sort of sweet spot to come in at the earlier stage, but we love to have long-term relationships with clients. I can confidently talk about several of our clients that go back 10 years plus. I mean, they keep working with us, which is a great sign and indication of it. We must be doing something right. But that's what we like, because we become almost the brand ambassadors with the internal team that are pushing the brand. We get to understand, and it's almost that unwritten thing. We often don't need a new brief from the clients because they already trust in us and understanding of what their brand is about, where they're going, and we can implement additional bits of work with relative ease because we know what it's all about. Back to the DNA.
So you're working on tactical stuff for them on an ongoing basis.
Yes, we are. Yes, strategic work we touched on already, but yes, tactical, ongoing work, which could be you mentioned it earlier. It could be literature, print work. Often these days, of course, web, digital media, we get involved in. Yeah, and most recently we found ourselves, and a very enjoyable part of the work for me because it's something I find very rewarding. We've been working on video stories and video. Brand messaging, brand awareness through video. We obviously work with some external specialists who are the camera crew and the editing and the audio side, but it's often directed by us. The main messages come from us. Yeah.
So when do you get involved in naming businesses or their products? At what point?
Yes, I love naming. I do. Yes, because I'm a bit of a. You said at the outset I've come from a graphic design background, but I'm much more of a wordsmith. Often in design terms, people fall into the sort of they're an illustrative, visual sort of designer, if you like, or they're more of a sort of typographic and word based. I'm definitely a more word based person personally. So I love the challenge of discovering words that would work to fit the brief, or indeed generating brand new words. I mean, that's also quite a fun thing, isn't it, with brand naming?
Yeah, it's also very difficult in terms of having a name that's available globally, that is usable, that's ownable. How do you navigate all that?
Yeah, now this is where I have to defer to you, clearly, your area of specialism. But I tell you what we do. We do a very rough and dirty sort of bit of desk research. We essentially, go to the trademark registry and conduct a few quick searches. They're not exhaustive by any means, but at least what they do is give us. They flag up any early warning signs, and they tell us. More than anything, they tell us what to avoid, I suppose. So we've been, as an example, we've been working most recently for a client in beds and mattresses, and they have had us look at three or four different names recently. I forget, but we know that we need to look around. You're gonna correct me on this, but I think class 2020 for bedding, furniture, and so on. Anyway, so we would make sure that we're not there's nothing in close proximity, nothing that's too close to the names that we might be proposing before we even put them in front of the client, because clearly the worst thing in the world is for them to get terribly excited about a lovely creative direction only to say, whoa, somebody's got the word almost identical to it. So yeah.
So you present a few options to the client, do you?
Yes, we do. Yes, quite a few options often, because we, despite knowing, back to this thing, we've got the brief written. Despite knowing quite prescriptively where they need to be, there's always subtle nuances of slightly different positioning around that core central theme. And so, yes, we put various things to them. We would also initially look up URLs, available domain names. That's such a key thing these days, that it's one thing to say we're in the clear for a trademark, but if there's no hope of getting anything like it, for the web, then we've got to make them aware of that early on. There are so many new suffixes to the URLs now popping up, as you will know, which mean that you can be quite creative with how you even a well-known word or name can sometimes now be available as an alternative URL.
Yeah, I don't think the .com is the be and end all, really, because you can have a perfectly good name just because the .com isn't available. I think that's misguided not to go with that name, because often brands end up buying the .com maybe 10 years down the line.
Yes.
But,
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. I think you're so right in what you're saying there, that don't have a blinkered view. Think about it creatively. I mean, there's .shop, isn't there? And there's any number of
exactly.
alternatives now that can be considered. But
Yeah,
of
it's
course,
hard enough finding a name without sort of being hampered by the domain name.
yes, it is. Yes, it is. But I just think we want to be mindful of it. What we don't want to do is
Yeah.
false optimism around, hey, you can have everything you want with this, only to discover that it's so locked down. There's no room for maneuver. Of course, we would always advise our clients to work with somebody like you as early as possible in the process, and we defer. We can bring a partner in. And offer suggestions to the client, but if they've got their own legal IP specialists or legal advice already, then they may choose to pursue that. But we would always say, like a caveat really, that says we've done a very rough and dirty bit of research here. That's all it is. We came up with a really good name for clients back, I think it was late last year, and they were very excited about it. We were aware that this word, it wasn't a brand new generated word, it existed, and for them it had we felt it was going to resonate really well in our marketplace. But we discovered that internationally, and I think it was somebody, I forget where they were, but elsewhere in Europe, had already were not using the name, the trademark, the name, but had protected it. And we suggested to them they approach those people with a view to seeing whether any trading could be done. In the end, it wasn't successful. They didn't get that, but it's still an unused. This is a frustration, isn't it? When it's protected, but it's not in common use. It's not there. It's not. There was nothing on the web. And my understanding is the people that own it are still not taking any advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously after 5 years, they lose it because you can put them to proof of use. But in the meantime, it may be they've just registered because they're getting ready to get their brand out there. And
quite possible. I think in this case, and I need to. You've got me thinking. I should check it up again. It was already a few years.
Oh, right. Well, you've got no problems if somebody's not been using a name for 5 years.
Right.
The onus is then on them, which is really what I often feel, that this separation that exists between brand creation and IP is a kind of 20th century approach, which isn't so tenable in the 21st century. Certainly, I know the Googles of this world make it an interdisciplinary exercise because they want to get strong brands. And they bring in the legal right up front because it actually does determine what you create. If you know the rules, the ins and outs of what's ownable, what the trademark registers are showing.
Yes.
So, why do you think there is this separation between IP and branding such that, you're not at all unusual? The agency will say to their clients, you should get your lawyers to check it out. And often clients don't bother because they don't realize how important it is.
Yes. I think it's a separation because in the past, these are two very different disciplines, aren't they? And you're right, the more visionary, the more innovative players out there, like you've mentioned, are realizing that it's got to be joined up thinking. I certainly would advocate, I'd love, if you like, our package that we sell to the clients to be, incorporating the IP element and say, actually, if you like, it's a one-stop shop. You pay us a sum of money, and we make that happen as well for you. Perhaps that is the way forward to give people a more holistic solution.
Yes, well, I'm creating brandtuned for that very purpose.
Exactly. Yeah.
Of starting off by looking at the IP, and then it doesn't come out of the budget of the design agency because they, and it's not very expensive because it doesn't involve protection. It's more looking at the IP situation and educating the client so that the client then has a resource available during naming
Yes.
and such like. I'll
Well,
have to give you details of it when it's available.
yeah, I love that, because I think that one of the things we've suffered with, I think this is linked, and hopefully not going off on a tangent, but one of the things that our industry suffers with is the lack of science, quote unquote, if you like, the lack of um, structure, because we're often seen as that artistic, creative endeavor with which plays around with ideas, and yet actually, these companies who've taken it seriously, IP is one of the biggest assets they've got in their whole operation. So it's got to be taken more seriously. And I think anything that we can do to, as you say, educate, but also get clients to see that there is more structure than just creative thought processes, is a good thing. And I welcome that.
Just to end, which brand do you admire the most in your industry, or the industry you're helping with?
Well, I wondered if you'd almost allow me two answers to this. The reason I say that is, obviously there's so many, but I ended up thinking about it's, and it's hard to choose, but I ended up thinking about two in our industry. One is kitchens. I hasten to add we don't work for them at the moment, but it struck me that what they are is they're not a UK brand, and I wondered if therefore I was allowed to have homespun one and one farther afield.
Yes, so, feel free.
The one that I would pick up on is Boltop, and they are I think I'm right in saying a German brand of kitchen, very high end, and they. For me, the reason I sort of admire what they're doing is it's nothing to do with the logo or even a bit of sort of aesthetic styling. In fact, one wouldn't be surprised if you look at their website to see that very sort of Germanic kind of understated, virtually just black and white, aesthetic to what they do. But it's because their whole story, their brand is so in it. Their name is so inextricably linked to everything they stand for. They're about connecting people and making spaces work, and they're about an architectural approach to space. And everything they do, their sort of founder and current their current MD on a video piece, for instance, extols the virtues of their love of material. And it's definitely worth checking them out, and I can send you a link for them. But Boltop, spelled BULTHAUP.
Oh, right. That's not how I would have spelled it.
You would.
Yes, it would be useful to add that to the show notes.
Yes. And they've got a great video on there. I hope they haven't changed it from their website, and I think they've got more than one video, but it's very much about the sort of expression of materials and their passion for detail and making these spaces work on a human level. So for me, it's a great example of branding is not a logo, and brand messaging, story, and back to your wonderful word, purpose. And so often we talk to people about the why. Why. Yeah. Why is the best question to start with, isn't it? So that's my number one. Then in a back at home, closer to home, I have to say that Perrin and Rowe, who are brassware, brassware and taps, and that sort of thing, both for kitchens and in a bathroom context. They have Mayfair London as their sort of little descriptor under their branding, and I've been particularly aware recently of some great advertising they've been doing, because again, it's about the story. They they talk about brassware forged in the Black Country, from the heart of the Industrial Revolution, and their latest advertising, which one will see in various trade publications such as EKBB, which is Essential Kitchen Bathroom, is a lovely, hero shot of this beautiful tap. I think it's a brass finished, but the backdrop to it is steam locomotives, because their messaging is, it's inspired from the same place that 150 years ago Joseph and George Armstrong built locomotives. And we're still making in the same we're making our product in the factory where they were sort of forging parts for these massive steam locomotives. So I just love the way that they're working on their story, and it's authentic, and that's the big thing for me.
I love stories, so
Yes.
definitely if we could have that as well to add to the show notes so that listeners can have a look and be inspired.
Absolutely. I'm very, very happy to share those. And neither of those are ones we've worked on, but I take my hat off to the way that they and their agencies have managed to maintain this. And it's a really big one for me: authenticity.
Yeah,
we can all invent things, but if we can take the essence of what a company is and its personality and keep using that, we say in a lot of our work, we're here to uncover what makes your brand special. In some cases, if you've forgotten what's special about it, let's help you resurrect that. And there's so many examples, and I have to apologize for the many others I could have used. But those are my UK and further afield Europeans. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much indeed, Stephen. Good to have had you on this podcast.
Thank you very much.
That's it for this week. Do subscribe to the BrandTuned newsletter to get weekly updates. I'd also love to get your feedback. Just send me an email to info@brandtuned.com. Finally, if you liked the episode, please do share it with your friends and colleagues and review it on iTunes or whichever platform you use to listen to podcasts. If you leave us a 5-star review, it means more people will listen and we can spread the word much more quickly about the podcast. Thank you, and bye for now.